Good afternoon. I'm still reading from the first chapter of my book, This Jewish Life Stories of Discovery, Connection, and Joy. The first chapter contains stories about birth. Oh, but she's perfect. The story of Anita Landy. When we called my parents to tell them we were going to pick up our soon to be adopted infant, my mom asked, Anita, what does she look like? What she meant was, how bad are her disabilities? I have no idea, Mom. She's a baby. So you're taking her sight unseen? Mom, I said, I didn't see Jamie, Noah, or Adam before I gave birth to them. You took me sight unseen. So it's unseen with this one, too. She needs us, she needs a home, and we have a home. My husband Doug and I love children. At the time, we had 3 biological children and wanted more. However, I had ruptured a disc with each child, and I knew my back couldn't take another pregnancy. Noah, our second, was a preemie and has problems related to his premature birth. Adam, child number 3, had a stroke when he was an infant due to an inherited condition that left him with a hearing impairment and minor learning disabilities. Adoption seemed the best course of action for more children, not only because of all of the medical histories, but because on the plus side, Doug is a doctor and I am a special education teacher. Plus, given the fact that our boys' births had given us lots of experience navigating medical and insurance issues, it all just made sense. We were specifically looking for Jewish kids. Once we started researching adoption, we learned that not only was there a real need to place Jewish kids with disabilities, but on the flip side, few Jewish couples were lining up to adopt children with special needs. I don't know why more Jewish couples are not willing to adopt less than perfect children, but the result is that a lot of Jewish kids grow up not knowing what it is to light Shabbos candles or celebrate Passover. A comment we heard among some of our Jewish acquaintances was, why would you do this? It's not necessary. What difference will it make if these kids are raised Jewish or not? Doug and I felt it was necessary. A Jewish soul is a Jewish soul. Looking back now, adopting our last 3 kids has certainly made a difference to them. There are lots of kids with special needs who are cognitively intact. Just because kids have medical problems doesn't mean they can't go on and have kids of their own, thereby keeping the Jewish line going. You know that saying about saving one life means saving the world? Well, who knows what kind of world can be saved by adopting kids with special needs? Doug and I settled on seeking out children with medical problems like cerebral palsy or spina bifida because we had experience with these things both professionally and personally. Since our son is hearing impaired and we knew how to sign, taking a deaf child was also another option. We wrote to every Jewish family agency in the country, Jewish Family Service agency in the country. Some wrote back, some didn't. Without exception, however, those who wrote back told us to contact the Jewish Children Adoption Network in Denver. It's not an agency, but more of a clearinghouse for Jewish kids with special needs. We set in motion our home study process and within 2 weeks got calls from 2 agencies. One call was from Adopt a Special Kid and one was from the place in Denver. 2 little girls had been born within a day of each other, one who was deaf and one who had spina bifida. 4 or 5 families were already in line to adopt the deaf baby. No one had stepped forward to take the infant with spina bifida. Doug and I decided she was the child for us. On the plane to New York City, I fretted to Doug about my capacity to love this little baby as much as I loved my birth kids. He reminded me that he hadn't carried our kids, but the minute he held them, he loved them. He also reminded me that I had worried about loving my second child as much as my first. Love is love. It's independent of birth order. Adopting Rachel and later Becky and Stephanie taught me that loving children has nothing to do with how they find their way into your arms. When we got to the hospital, I took one look at our daughter-to-be and said, oh my God, she's perfect. No one's ever called this baby perfect, the NICU nurse told me. And I suppose to an outsider she wasn't. She had a large lesion on her back where her spinal cord had been protruding in the sac. Normally, the first thing they do is remove the sac and close the opening. But the surgeons couldn't do it yet in this case. She had clubbed feet and had already needed a brain shunt, so her hair was shaved and she had stitches across her scalp. But she had the biggest, brownest eyes in the world, and she looked perfect to us. We knew in an instant that she was the fit, that she was our child. What was unbelievable to me was that somehow God had worked it so that someone else had given birth to our child. It was clear that she was ours. All my fears of bonding were left behind somewhere in the skies over New York. The baby's parents were Russian immigrants who had only been in the U.S. a couple of years and didn't feel equipped to care for her. In Russia, it's a real taboo to have such a kid. There, these children are literally left to die in the streets because the couple lived in a tight Russian community, word of her condition would have made the mother's two younger sisters ineligible for marriage. But they were adamant that she go to a Jewish family if at all possible. We named our new daughter in synagogue soon after we got home. Her name is Rachel, after my grandmother Rachel. Half a year later, we got another call. A couple had given birth to a child with spina bifida. They had heard about us from one of their NICU nurses who knew about Rachel. Would we adopt their baby? We were not even home when the call came. We were 250 miles away visiting our parents. Our friend had gone into our house to get something, and for some reason she couldn't explain even to herself, she answered the phone when it rang. The timing of our friend's presence in our house was nothing short of miraculous. We called the couple right away and told them that we had just adopted Rachel and we weren't sure we were ready to take on another infant so soon. They had no family support. They were scared. We offered to be that support and help them through the rough spots, but they insisted. They wanted someone to adopt their child, and without even meeting us, the someone they wanted was us. Parents who have given birth to a handicapped child have a tremendously hard time giving up their children. Society applauds teenage girls who give up their babies for adoption into a better situation. We say how wonderful, how courageous you are for making such a sacrifice. Well, the same is true for parents of disabled children. These babies are not unwanted. They are loved and their parents are in agony because for a variety of reasons they don't feel they can care for their own child. They decide, just as the teen moms do, that it would be in the best interest of their child that she would be raised by someone else. But no one applauds these parents. People either shrug and say, yeah, I would too if I had such a kid, or they silently criticize them for not being courageous enough to stand by their child. Let me tell you, it takes an enormous amount of courage to give up a disabled child, to trust that your child, whose needs are so great and whose future is so uncertain, is going to be raised with love and care. What are the chances of this happening, of the NICU nurse knowing about us, of our friend being at our home just the moment the couple called, of the couple learning about us and not taking no for an answer? Once again, I was certain there was some sort of divine intervention going on. Rebecca was a truly beautiful baby. I'm not heavily into looks, but she was strikingly beautiful. Her spinal lesion was closed, and our expectation was that since she could move her legs, she'd be running around her sister, Rachel. We also thought that it would be easier for both girls to have each other. Becky was coming with another issue we had to deal with. Her birth parents were Irish Catholic, and we were very upfront about the fact that their child would be raised in a Jewish home. No Mass, no Christmas trees. We would convert Becky to Judaism as soon as we could. Were they prepared to accept that? Jim and Sally told us that they had already discussed it with their priest and they were okay with it. No, not only okay, but it was good. Their daughter would be raised within a religious framework by parents concerned for her spiritual life. Again, I felt a gentle nudging from God had led Becky's parents to us. When the girls were 3 years old, we moved to Rochester, New York. We'd been living in Traverse City, Michigan, but the girls' conditions required access to hospitals better equipped to deal with their ongoing needs. While we thought Becky's disabilities will not be as harsh as Rachel's, she has had a difficult time of it. She has a complication of spina bifida called a Chiari malformation. Her cerebellum is misshapen and the malformation sits on the brainstem, exerting persistent pressure. The malformation cannot be changed, but doctors can surgically make room for it within the cranial cavity. If you live near enough to doctors who can operate. Becky has a tracheal tube now and is dependent on a ventilator to breathe. For a while, we held off Becky's conversion, but each time we had a crisis, I realized that I could not deal with another Chiari surgery if she weren't converted. What if something happened? Where would Becky be buried? Complicating the situation was the fact that there were no Orthodox rabbis in our area to oversee the conversion. An Orthodox rabbi in Rochester had agreed to perform the conversion when we moved to the community, but only if we agreed to commit to lead an observant life, totally keep kosher, keep Shabbos, no eating in non-kosher restaurants. Our lives had been moving in that direction, but with no firm commitment. Was the family prepared for such a change? Our kids had been so enthusiastic up to this point. They loved their new little sisters and had rolled with all the adjustments of living with not one, but two disabled kids. They were willing to go for it, and even Jamie, who was past bat mitzvah age and not entirely sold on the idea, promised not to do anything inappropriate in our home or flout any discrepancies in our observance. We took the plunge. Every Shabbos is so special now. I love it each week as Doug and I take turns blessing our 6 kids. We are together, playing games, reading with one another. The girls all light their own candles. Doug and I married when Jamie was 3, and we fell into having her light candles with me. So when the little girls came along, we started the tradition of giving them their own set of candlesticks for their 3rd birthday. When Becky is home, she lights her own candles, and when she is in the hospital, she gets frustrated and feels it's not a true Shabbos. Stephanie, our 3rd adopted daughter, just turned 3 and is proud to share the privilege of lighting candles the way her big sisters do. Growing up, I loved being Jewish, but always wondered, is there really a God? I struggled to believe that there was, but without much success. It took Rachel and Becky and then Stephanie to bring God into my life with absolute trust and belief. True, I had given birth 3 times and recognized the miracle in each and every birth. It certainly was miraculous that our preemie son lived and that our son who had a stroke could walk and talk. But somehow those were miracles derived from human endeavors, the efforts of wonderful doctors and teachers. I wanted to feel that God had guided them, but still could not accept with complete surety God's hands in those miracles. Then I held each of our adopted daughters. They felt so right in my arms, and I knew for the first time in my life, yes, there is a God. These children, my children, could not have been brought to me physically, emotionally, spiritually, in any other way. This could not have happened without God. Doug and I set out to give Jewish children a home. Along the way, we even brought another Jewish soul into being. We have never regretted our decision for a moment, for our daughters have brought our family joy, triumphs, and a deeper understanding of God and Judaism. More miraculous than what we have done, negotiating wheelchairs, breathing tubes, countless surgeries, heart-stopping races to the hospital, is what other parents have done. They gave us sight unseen, their children. Thank you for listening.